Yes, we are. Welcome back, everyone, to the Stream of Bhakti podcast, pilot episode number 2. We're really excited to be with everyone again today. We have Maria and Kala with us, and I'm sure people will join on the Facebook Live as well. How are you doing today, Nitai?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
So, Nitai and I are your hosts for the Stream of Bhakti podcast, which is a yoga philosophy podcast. Is that okay to say, Nitai?
Yoga philosophy podcast? Sure, why not?
Yeah,
Bhakti podcast,
based
Kirtan something podcast.
the roots of
Yeah.
kirtan.
Yeah.
Yeah, based on the teachings of the ancient and beautiful text Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a summation of the Vedanta Sutras. Should we get right into it?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, um, still have to get into this routine of announcing the podcast properly, but um, Bhakti Pod, great name. um, the summation of yoga philosophy in the Srimad Bhagavatam is a big deal because some of you may or may not be aware, Kirtan Vancouver, which is a nonprofit that Nitai and I are both part of, and Nitai is a educator in, myself too. We have Kirtan trainings that we offer in Vancouver locally. And in our most recent one, which was a quarantine kind of podcast, not podcast, sorry, Kirtan training online that we did on Zoom, Nitai was showing this large map of the various yoga texts. And seeing this map, even on a small screen, it's kind of like there's so much.
Mm.
It's like unimaginable almost how much there is in terms of content of yoga or bhakti philosophy, um, almost so that like sometimes it's not even fathomable that in one human lifetime a person can study or even go through it all even once. But the great news is, based on our podcast last week, that you don't have to go through all of it because it's summarized really nicely in the Srimad
Mhm.
Bhagavatam, which we will try to go through systematically week by week in this Stream of Bhakti podcast. Today is the second pilot episode, and the pilot episode means that we are not publicly advertising this one yet, although we may go back and post these when our social media pages are up for the Stream of Bhakti podcast. But this is like a private private viewing, a VIP audience um, that are joining us for the next, at least this week and maybe the next week as well, and then we'll go live. Right, Nitai?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just thinking about what you were saying about the vastness of the Vedas, and it's kind of cool because in the Bhagavatam, in the first canto, we're going to hear about how Vyasadeva wrote it and the vastness of it, and how he understood how he wasn't feeling like satisfied with what he had written,
Mm-hmm.
even though the volume was so massive and the amount of knowledge that he gave in the Vedas was so like incredible. But at the end of it, he was feeling like not fulfilled, not like he had actually articulated what he wanted to for the people. And then he went ahead and compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam, which captured the essence of everything that he wanted people to understand from the whole of the Vedic literature. And that's what we're reading. Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural commentary on the Vedas by the author himself, Srila Vyasadeva.
And the author is happy with this version?
Oh yeah,
Okay. Well, that's good.
yeah,
That's good
he was good with
news.
this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the refined, hand-picked, summarized, best version.
Yes.
Yeah. Shall we get into some reading?
Yeah.
Where are we starting today? Verse 3?
Yeah. Do you want to chant our invocation mantras and then we'll jump in?
Yes, absolutely. So, do you want to say something about the invocation mantras?
Invocation mantra is something that's really good to do at the beginning of entering the Bhagavatam like we're about to do, it invokes the presence of the divine and also um, gives a respectful nod to our teachers and sets the kind of the mind frame for absorbing knowledge. There is a bit of a translation there that you could read too about for some of the mantras.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So we'll start with our first one that we often do at our events too. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Narajaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tati Jayamudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto Narayan, unto Nar Narayan Rishi, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nashtapravishvabhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. By regular classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto Krishna, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Wow. Very nice verses.
Yeah, they're nice. So in the Bhagavatam, we just started last week. We went through some of the preface. I think we read most of that preface, and we went into text number 1 and text number 2. And the first three texts, text number 1, 2, and 3, are like the preface of the entire Bhagavatam. So there's a lot in the commentary here that Prabhupada gives, and the verses, the Sanskrit verses themselves, are quite long. Then starting in text 4, we begin our journey into the Bhagavatam itself. But we are on text 3.
Yeah.
And again, the commentary is lengthy here. We're just going to take a few particular paragraphs and then get into we're going to jump into the storyline beginning in text number 4. So this that we're now is continuing the preface, continuing setting up the Bhagavatam.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go for it.
Okay.
You want
Text
you want
1.3.
you want to read the Sanskrit for each verse?
I can. I don't know the melody of this particular composition of verse, but we can try anyway. Do you know?
Yeah, that's it. Maybe this isn't a conventional one. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm not sure about the text number 3, but text number 4 is easier.
It's easier.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll freestyle text number 3.
Okay.
Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, text 1.3. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam shukha mukhad amrita drava samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam muhur aho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. That was okay.
That was awesome.
All right. Translation. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Srila Shukadev Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls.
It was already sweet, but it became sweeter. So,
Emanating from the lips of Sri Shukadev Goswami.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
So can
That's
you?
how you know somebody's made it. You take something sweet and this person says it and it becomes even sweeter. How sweet
Yeah,
is this person? Wow.
we're
I,
gonna get into that. Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like that about a lot of things that you say, Nitai.
Well, that's very kind of you, Ani.
Yeah.
That's because you're. It's said that there's a diamond. It comes from coal, right? Isn't it? The coal becomes like more and more dense and dense
Compact
and
and
dense, and then
compact.
it eventually becomes a diamond. But a person has to know how to find the diamond in the coal. So you're one of those
Mm,
people.
well,
You can find diamonds in coal.
thank you. Well, I am in the stone business, so yeah. So are
Yeah.
we reading some of the purport?
Yeah, can you go to the third paragraph on page 52?
The
Okay,
one
so
starting with every.
let
Okay,
me frame this
okay,
for a minute.
okay.
This is important. This is important. Like what many paragraphs here? Yeah, so just read the first paragraph, and it may not make a lot of sense on first read, but but there's a lot of importance to it, and it happens to be the focus of the commentary here. But we're not going to read the whole thing, but go
Hmm.
for it. Give it a read.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's do it. First paragraph, right?
No, third paragraph.
Third paragraph. Okay, okay. The one starting with every living entity.
Yep.
Every living entity, beginning from Brahma, the firstborn living being within the material world, down to the insignificant ant, desires to relish some sort of taste derived from sense perceptions. These sensual pleasures are technically called rasas. Such rasas are of different varieties. In the revealed scriptures, the following 12 varieties of rasas are enumerated. 1. Rodra, or anger. 2. Adbhuta, or wonder. 3. Shringara, or conjugal love. 4. Hasya, or comedy. 5. Veera, or chivalry. 6. Daya, or mercy. 7. Dasya, or servitorship. 8. Sakhya, or fraternity. 9. Bhayanaka, or horror. 10. Bibhasta, shock. 11. Shanta, or neutrality. 12. Vatsalya, or parenthood.
Okay, so what's being said here is that right in that first sentence from Brahma, we're going to learn about Brahma later, right down to an insignificant ant, everyone's looking for some ras. Everyone's looking for some taste, some flavor. And that flavor, yeah, is known as ras. And that flavor is kind of an exchange with, uh, well, Prabhupada's saying in the commentary that for those of us who are conditioned, the exchange comes from sensual pleasures. In other words, the senses with their objects. So when we are trying to find happiness through our senses, we're having an exchange of an experience. Like there's an object coming in contact with it, but more so when we're dealing with in relationships. This is the thing that we're searching for. We're searching for a relationship with if with something or somebody. We either want relationship with other objects, we identify ourselves with objects, or we want relationships with people. And these relationships come in different flavors or rasas, and they're listed. A bunch of them are listed here, like anger, wonder, love, comedy, chivalry, mercy, service, friendship, horror, shock, neutrality, parenthood. So there's a mix there, right?
Mm.
Prabhupada says in the beginning of the next paragraph, the sum total of all these rasas is called affection or love. Primarily, so the sum total, these are all like based primarily in love. Primarily, such signs of love are manifested in adoration, service, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. So primarily, love comes in those forms. Serving
Mm.
somebody, having friendship, the love of a parent to a child, and also kind of intimate love. But when that love is absent, other emotions can be evoked, like anger, wonder, comedy, chivalry, fear, shock, and so on. There's a whole variety. And actually, what Prabhupada is doing here is he's not going to go into detail to explain each one of those things. That's done in a different book called the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami. It's like the Nectar of Devotion, and the book is the book that studies all of these different rasas.
Hmm.
So this is important because let's go to the next page,
Okay.
page 54. No, sorry, page 53.
The page numbers aren't the same for me. So
Oh, right, right. You got the
how many paragraphs should I fast forward?
one, two, three, four paragraphs later. Therefore, one who attains.
Got it. Therefore, one who attains full knowledge of these different rasas, which are the basic principles of activities, can understand the false representations of the original rasas, which are reflected in the material world. The learned scholar seeks to relish the real ras in the spiritual form. In the beginning he desires to become one with the Supreme. Thus, less intelligent transcendentalists cannot go beyond this conception of becoming one with the spirit whole without knowing of the different ras.
So there's a few interesting things here. One is that uh, what Prabhupada is, what the commentary is saying here is that when we experience these rasas in our current life, like say we experience these kinds of like different forms of love that we have in our relationships, these are actually reflections of of an original pure emotion. So what this is setting us up for is that how the material realm is like a mirror of the spiritual realm. And how we experience things in this world, like say, for example, love. The problem that we have experiencing that in this realm is that it sooner or later becomes interrupted. It can become interrupted by so many things that could interrupt a relationship, but ultimately, none of us are meant to stay in this world forever, right? In these bodies, we all know that. So there's an interruption. Whereas in the spiritual realm, the realm of the soul, there's no interruption. So this is setting up the idea of a concept of a personal a personal concept of the divine. And any thought on that?
Yeah, just thinking about the reflection of the. I mean, we were talking about this last time, the examples that Bhagavatam gave of, or that the commentator Prabhupada gave about the reflection being like it wasn't water in the desert. It was what was it? Oh, it was the opposite. It was a land mass being seen in the water.
No, it was you had it right the first time. It was like the mirage of water in the desert.
Oh,
And
okay.
and that because I think it's water because water is a real thing. So
Right.
there's something that looks like water, but
Mm-hmm.
but it's not water. But water
Mm-hmm.
does exist. So the things that we experience like real love,
Mm-hmm.
personality, like we all experience our own personalities in the personalities of others. The fact that these things are there, that we experience them, indicates that there isn't there's a they exist in truth in the spiritual realm as well.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of sort of detail and imagery here is amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
What we will find in the Bhagavatam is that there's going to be a contrast between the way that the transcendence is experienced by a bhakti yogi and other forms of transcendentalists. The Bhagavatam is the principal bhakti text, so we're going deep into bhakti yoga here, and it also happens to be the principal Vedic text. So,
sorry, Nita, your camera is frozen, at least on my end. Oh, it's back on again.
did
Okay,
could you hear what I was
good.
saying?
Yeah, we could hear everything, or I could anyway.
So there's going to be, as we get into the Bhagavatam, an interesting dynamic that develops where the path of bhakti will be contrasted with other ways of approaching the divine. So, namely having an impersonal understanding of the divine. And I would think it's safe to say that it's more common for people to feel drawn to an impersonal conception of divinity or the relationship with with their spiritual path because for so many reasons. One reason is because perhaps there hasn't really been a great presentation of what a personal conception of the divine would be like.
Mm.
You know, for example, as we're reading through the Bhagavatam, the term God is going to come up a lot. Did we talk about this last week?
We touched on it, but we can talk about it some more. I think we should.
Yeah. And that is a word we kind of have to reclaim, at least in this part of the world. Like it's a word, it can be a very triggering word, and not because of the word on its own, but because of what it's come to represent um, in our culture and the experience, and throughout our history, actually, Western history. People look back on it and they think many people don't feel comfortable with the way that that a personal God has been explained. That's one reason. Another reason is because it's also maybe hard to perceive what that would be like based on our own, you know, might just be a hard concept to really grasp.
Mm.
So, but we're going to encounter the word a lot, and we need to redefine it. We need to be able to use this word, understanding how it's defined in the Vedic texts, and God is referring to the personal form of the absolute. It doesn't. It refers to a very benevolent and beautiful personality that is very playful, filled with love, and ultimately embodied in the form of a beautiful cowherd boy. So, you know, if that's not way different than what other people have perhaps heard to this point, it's like it's a concept that is just like and therefore there are 12 cantos of Bhagavatam to explain it.
Mm.
So um, we're not going to pause every time we come across this, but we just have to change the mood behind this word and not feel averse to it if possible, because
Right.
it's really very much connected with the ancient teachings of yoga. But we will find terms like in this paragraph it says, thus the less intelligent transcendentalist cannot go beyond this conception of becoming one. It's kind of challenging sentence, right?
Hmm.
But um, it doesn't mean that a person doesn't have the intelligence. It means that um, there's a conception that might be better, that the person either is not yet aware of or is not attracted to. So, I'll give you an example. Like, you know, if something happens in your life, right? Have you ever had something happen in your life where you just feel things kind of fall together, like beyond your control? You just
Yeah.
something, let's say something really good, and you look back at it and you think, or even in the moment, and you think, like, how did that even happen? Like the universe has got my back here. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like all these things just fell into place in a certain way. And the other interesting thing about this is that nobody else may be able to understand the nuances like you. Even though, like, say, you would have Manjari there, like someone who's very close to you, or we may have some very close friends, but there are sometimes things that happen that are so we can see how they've kind of been strung together in a series of events or in a meaningful way that even it's hard to explain to someone who's very close to us exactly how things have lined up and happened does that make sense?
Yeah,
You have
absolutely.
that experience?
Definitely.
So when those things happen, it's like it's as if, and people can think like that, that, well, the universe kind of understands or is helping me, is guiding me. There's some kind of like, there's something going on that I'm connected with here, and therefore things are happening and flowing. That's kind of not a intimidating, not an intimidating conception of the absolute truth, just like a benevolent kind of force in nature or something that just wants us to achieve, wants us to improve, right?
Hmm. Growing up in the Bhakti tradition, amongst my peers, it's affectionately referred to as seeing the hand of Krishna.
Right.
Mm,
Okay, so imagine something happened, right? Say like you're looking out your window
mm,
and you're just thinking about all these events that happen, and you're thinking, wow, look at all this just lined up like that. And then as you're looking at the clouds, all of a sudden the clouds kind of take the form of a fist, and all of a sudden you see in the cloud this like, yeah,
yeah,
right at
that's
you.
never happened to me.
But just imagine that happen, right? You'd be like, you here this cloud just goes like, yeah, honey.
If you're
And
listening to just the audio, Nita is holding a great big thumbs up,
right,
showing what the cloud perhaps looks like.
right. You get a big thumbs up from the cloud, right? And you
Yeah.
know it's for you.
Hmm.
You know it's yours. You know this is just for you. So then what are you gonna do? You're gonna turn around and say Manjari, you're like, oh man, you should see this terrible thing that just happened. This is like what a ridiculous thing that just happened, right? I don't like what happened. You'd be thrilled, right?
Hmm.
You'd be thrilled. So
Hmm.
why would you be thrilled? Because it's even more personal.
Mm.
It's even more personal than just things happen to fall in place, but there's this force out there that's just like wanting you to experience more happiness, to improve in some wonderful way. And so that thumbs up from the clouds is like even a deeper connection. It's like, what? You mean we're that much connected? So that's what it's like entering into the personal conception of the divine, right? Like it's
Hmm.
things become more personal and more meaningful, and it's not a fearful thing.
Right.
It's not a terrifying thing. It's not a vengeful thing. And that's why I was saying we got to kind of like redefine this word God that has often been depicted as this kind of different personality and a different kind of a mood, but that's nothing to do with the conception that's described in the Vedas. It's like beautiful, playful, empowering,
Hmm.
loving, individual, spiritual consciousness that's always reaching out to us, and so coming in contact with that personality is like exciting, like
Yeah.
as it would be exciting to see that thumbs up in the sky, right? Like there's a lot there to look forward to.
This contrast is interesting, actually. In the Vedic writings, there's so many, I mean, countless upon countless names of the divine describing different features. It gets summed up in this one name, God, that may have certain context. But in Sanskrit, the translations of these names are so specific and so beautiful that you couldn't even think of it as being a fearful or vengeful kind of situation. Like the name Krishna literally means the all attractive one. Or there's names like the source of pleasure, or the one with the beautiful eyes, or the one
Hmm.
like the, how can you think of this person as being a terrible person or a person to be feared, or the lover of living beings, the lover of cows, the ultimate friend? Like, Sanskrit is a very beautiful language, and going through these texts will definitely help us reclaim that word. Actually, I mean, we don't even really need to use the word, but in the context of the purports here that we're reading. I'm glad that you're explaining because that summation of the word does come up. But also the beautiful names like Krishna come up. The name Bhagavan comes up as well. So hopefully this will help take away some of the negative context and help us go deeper into the beauty of what the Bhagavatam is offering.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Srila Prabhupada is translating this into English, right? And he's also, as we mentioned last time, well, he learned like Victorian style English, in the 1800s. Oh, no, he
Right,
was born in the late 1800s.
right.
But, in the early 1900s, he was educated in the British colonial system. And we'll come across this language. And Prabhupada will use the word God often because it was a way in English to convey um, the idea. And but he also uses the word Godhead, which is
Mm.
nice because it changes it up a bit. You know what I mean?
The personality of Godhead.
Yeah.
That's also interesting. The direct meaning right there that the Godhead has personality. There's a personal form.
Yeah, that's a good point. The form, personal form.
Hmm.
So, you want to keep going?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Page 54. Like, we won't spend perhaps so much time on the commentary all the time, but there's just some key points here in the preface that set us up. Um,
Setting the scene.
yeah, exactly. And now we can go back to this point you were bringing up right as soon as we read the translation. Can you read
Hmm.
the first paragraph? Oh, it starts with in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the transcendental pastimes. And you can just read both those paragraphs. They're two short paragraphs.
Okay. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are narrated, and the narration is systematically depicted by Srila Shukadev Goswami. Thus, the subject matter is appealing to all classes of persons, including those who seek liberation and those who seek to become one with the Supreme Whole. In Sanskrit, the parrot is also known as shuk. When a ripened fruit is cut by the red beaks of such birds, its sweet flavor is enhanced. The Vedic fruit, which is mature and ripe in knowledge, is spoken through the lips of Srila Shukadev Goswami, who is compared to the parrot not for his ability to recite the Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from his learned father, but for his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to all classes of men.
So uh, he, this is a beautiful analogy, isn't it? Like,
Hmm.
apparently, when the parrot bites into a fruit, that fruit becomes sweeter.
Yeah.
So Sukadev Goswami, he is somehow making this teaching that was already there and already sweet, he's making it sweeter. But how is he making it sweeter? That's the last sentence. Uh, as he is not compared to a parrot just because of his ability to recite something exactly as it was heard, but because of his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to everyone. So the idea is that um, when we hear transcendental knowledge, if we are able to take that knowledge and it somehow enters our heart, we get a realization. Like we hear something and it triggers a moment of understanding within the heart based on what we've heard. And that understanding within the heart, we call that like a realization, right? We get some sudden realization about something. Some pieces come together or something that were not quite together like they were before that moment. And sometimes that's accompanied by a feeling, like a confirmation in the heart about something that we know inside, but now we've kind of like can articulate it or we understand how to say it now. Something that we already kind of believe because spiritual knowledge is already in the heart. So when that transcendental spiritual knowledge enters your heart, and it causes a realization, and you're able to repeat that same knowledge, and it mixes with your realization, it becomes sweeter.
Mm.
And why does it become sweeter? Is because it becomes even more accessible to the people around you. Like this book is thousands of years old. And we've just been talking about how there are some challenges as we'll read through here, because some of the use of English might be a little bit challenging to get through. But when it enters into your heart, and then you're speaking something, you're bringing it out again. You're kind of regurgitating it, but with mixed with your realization, what comes out
No.
can go into my heart more easily. So
It
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 becomes
kind
even sweeter. Means like, wow, we get even more impacted.
yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me think of, and I'm not just saying this because I'm very hungry, but we're in the association. Manjari's in the other room. Kala's here. Audrey's here. These are some of the best chefs that I've experienced in my life, and kind of makes me think about, the same kind of food that you can go out and get anywhere. These people are taking recipes and making them better and better and better. It's the same things, whatever it is, whatever is being made. Like Audrey made this amazing croissant the other day, that, a vegan version, making it authentically French in Canada. And like it was one of the best things I've had. I've probably had it before as well, but just the way that, the heart that's being put into it, the thought that's being put into it, the love that's being put into it, it's getting even better and better. So, transcendental knowledge like this being passed through from one beautiful person to another beautiful person to another beautiful person, like, why wouldn't it get sweeter and sweeter and better and better?
Hmm. Nice analogy. I had those croissants too. They were awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the implication here then is, and it's part of one of the principles of bhakti, is that bhakti is not a path of solitude.
Mhm.
That in order to digest these teachings, actually one requires to hear the realizations from others who are also applying our hearts to the teachings. So it's not possible to do it alone. Like the a bhakti yogi, the spiritual path of a bhakti yogi includes other spirit bhakti yogis who are, you know, sharing their realizations,
Mhm.
and therefore the heart is being. So when I hear those realizations, then my heart is being impacted from different angles of vision, and it gives it a very thorough kind of like exposure to the transcendental knowledge. But also, when we have realizations, we also need to be able to share them. We need to be able to bring it out, to share it, to speak it, and that helps fortify the understandings that we're gaining in our heart, and helps us put into the next phase, which is how to incorporate it into life. So,
It's our, we talk about this a lot at the Kirtans, our original identity, our eternal spiritual being, Sat Chit Ananda, right?
mm,
Truthful, full of knowledge, full of bliss. So inherently, our consciousness, personality, it's like an abundance of knowledge that's there, but we're not really able to tap into it. And we're going to get into this more as we go through the Srimad Bhagavatam, that the knowledge exists, the happiness exists, but it's this practice of reading and learning and sharing that will allow us to tap into those beautiful realizations. They don't just happen. At least I don't think, it hasn't happened with me a lot, but more through the systematic studying and more through the systematic experience of kirtan, what we do together all the time. Like this is what brings out this beautiful knowledge and this beautiful sharing of realization.
yeah, that's nice. Kirtan's important to bring that up, because
Yeah.
the that mantra that we chant back and forth, it's the exact same thing. It becomes sweeter
Hmm.
when we hear others chanting it.
Yeah.
Like when we're chanting, what does that feel like when we're sitting in a kirtan with, of course, we don't have that, haven't had that experience in a while, but imagine like 50 people are sitting in a room and you chant a mantra and all of a sudden you hear 50 people chant it back. How sweet is that? It's like times 50 sweet.
This is like one of the most common things that I hear as feedback from people that are joining us at Kirtan for the first time is,
Mm.
oh, well, I heard Kirtan on YouTube and I practiced it a lot at home and I've never done it in a group before. But this, wow, like this is a whole other level. It's like the proof in the pudding right there, right? Like people are
Hmm.
constantly giving this feedback that it gets better and better when it's done with
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It
Yeah.
it defies the what we would think would happen like in normal circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, another thing, like what you just pointed out, that how it's not this, the study is not meant for just solitude. It gets better and better. Like going back to these rasas, one second, the sense pleasures are technically called rasas. Such rasas are of different varieties. One of these here is sakya or fraternity or friendship. Like this is we're experiencing a reflection of something that we were talking about in the spiritual realm, like sakya or fraternity or friendship, this exists, and this is a very pure thing that we can experience in our Bhagavatam context with each other. I mean, it just further goes to show that it's not necessarily necessary that our spiritual path is a path of solitude. It's actually saying right here in the Bhagavatam that the rus or the beauty or the sweetness comes from one of these qualities, which is friendship.
Hmm. Hmm. And that is going to be the note that this commentary is going to end on.
Mm.
Prabhupada is going to say a little bit more in the commentary, like along those lines of what you just said. Um, but there is another little. Can we dig in a little bit more here?
Yeah,
I
totally.
I was thinking, that we might end up going into the setting to the actual beginning of the storyline of the Bhagavatam, but I don't know. There's still a good chunk of stuff here in this commentary, and next time we meet next Saturday, I think we'll be able to get through about a good chunk of it, probably like about six texts all in one shot. So the pace will pick up, but because the first three texts are the preface, and there's so much packed in here. Um, so on page,
So we're going to be binge reading next week. Six episodes,
yeah,
six verses.
okay. Go ahead and read the paragraph that starts off with the subject matter is so presented. And this is a long paragraph, so at some point I'm just gonna kind of cut you off if that's okay.
Done. No problem.
All right.
The subject matter is so presented through the lips of Srila Shukadev Goswami that any sincere listener that hears submissively can at once relish transcendental tastes which are distinct from the perverted tastes of the material world. The ripened fruit is not dropped all of a sudden from the highest planet of Krishnaloka. Rather, it has come down carefully through the chain of disciplic succession without change or disturbance. Foolish people who are not in the transcendental disciplic succession commit great blunders by trying to understand the highest transcendental ras, known as the rasa dance, without following in the footsteps of Shukadev Goswami, who presents this fruit very carefully by stages of transcendental realization. One should be intelligent enough to know the position of Srimad Bhagavatam by considering personalities like Shukadev Goswami, who deals with the subject so carefully. This process of disciplic succession of the Bhagavad school suggests that in the future also Srimad Bhagavatam has to be understood from a person who is factually a representative of Srila Shukadev Goswami. Should I keep going?
One more sentence.
A professional man, I was wondering actually when I was reading this purport this morning if we're going to get to this sentence. A professional man or woman who makes a business out of reciting the Bhagavatam illegally is certainly not a representative of Srila Shukadeva Goswami.
Okay, I wanted to get to that sentence because well, there's a couple of words here that, again, we're going to set the mood.
Right.
But basically, what Prabhupada here is cautioning against in the commentary is that the Bhagavatam is sometimes read and understood on an academic level. That people take this book because in the world of Sanskrit, the Bhagavatam is actually quite a famous text. The Sanskrit is perfect in this text, and people study it, but they have no interest in bhakti. It's just a fact that this is something that's studied by people who have no interest in bhakti. But there's so much in here, you can't really read it without getting involved in it because there's just so much information and knowledge in this book. So they interpret things, and they people who study it only on the basis of academics, meaning studying it because of trying to understand the Sanskrit language, or studying it because it fits into kind of a mythological framework, like that, which is kind of the way that the academic world treats this kind of literature. Whereas in the Bhakti tradition itself, it's not treated as mythology, actually. And it's also filled with the purpose of application. Like, you can't really understand the Bhagavatam unless one is immersed in the practice of Bhakti Yoga, because it's not just a textbook of information. It's transcendental knowledge that's meant to impact the heart and is meant to be applied. So it's like there's such a vast difference between just a mundane, you could say, material interpretation of what's going on in this book to the bhakti yogis or the spiritual masters going back generations and generations who have uncovered the spiritual truths here. So Prabhupada is saying that's illegal. You can't do that.
Yeah, you
But
can't misinterpret that word. That's
yeah, yeah. But
pretty
that's
straightforward.
particularly for, okay, so here's the other point.
Hmm.
There is a dynamic here that we're entering into, which is that there are spiritual teachers or gurus who are going to speak in the Bhagavatam. And what is the mood there? Like Prabhupada used a little earlier the word foolish. Foolish people do this. Has anybody ever called you a fool before?
I think so, yeah. I
You ever
think
rem
so.
you ever remember somebody going, "Oh, you fool"? You ever remember anybody ever? Do you remember that? Like someone?
I do. Yeah, actually, I do.
Yeah, me too. And depending on the context of when it happens, it can be. Well, I mean, if it's done by someone who's trying to hurt you,
Hmm.
then it can be very hurtful. But if it's done from someone who loves you very much, then it's a different effect.
Hmm.
And I had, yeah, I have a memory of one time when it happened to me. Can I tell you a little story?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this was actually with my teacher, with my guru. This is going to be one of those stories.
My God, my instance is also with the same person. But anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, because my teacher, my guru, is also very intimate to Ani's family, actually. Ani, you've known him since you were born, I imagine.
Hmm.
And he's been my teacher now for almost 20 years, my guru. And so back in when in my earlier days of brahmachari life, or in my earlier days of monk life, I had the opportunity to assist his secretary when he would come to Canada, because he travels around the world. So when he would come to Canada, I would get like a week to 2 weeks of being able to become part of his inner circle and kind of assist the secretary. And also sometimes the secretary would step out and do other things, and I would be there. And I also was able to do personal service and things like that. So it was a great opportunity for and I was quite young at the time. So one of the things that I did was he would have people coming in and visiting him at different times, evening, morning, or whatever. There's a whole rhythm going on. And one of the things that the student does for the teacher is, and we'll find this in the Bhagavatam, there's this idea of menial service. You just do some simple things, like I would go in, I would clean the room. He had two rooms. He had like a sitting room where guests would come, and in the room where he was staying. And so at some point in time when he'd be out, I would go in and I'd do a little cleaning in there, and just to do some service. And as I was doing that, there was this little stainless steel like cylinder thing with tilak in it. People may not know what that is. One sec, I'll grab an example.
Okay. Nitai has exited the scene for a moment,
Was that?
and he reappears.
Yeah. Okay, see, this is a glass. This is glass. And if I were to tip that over, there's some water in there, and this is clay. So it's called tilak. And in Bhakti Yoga, it's just something that can be done, that it's used in meditation. There's 12 places where we mark the body, and the forehead is one. Sometimes people may have seen that sometimes Bhakti Yogis, they put this mark like this, two lines on either side of their forehead. There's a meditation there. It's marking the body because the body is like a temple and kind of sanctifying the body in meditation. So my arm somehow knocked it off the table,
Oh man.
and it was filled with this like clay water mix, and it landed at a certain angle, like right there, but I can't tip my thing, but it just was tipped at just the right way. So I've never seen anything like it. When it hit the floor, it was like a cannon. It just exploded clay all over the room.
Ouch.
So I was like horrified, and I quickly got into cleaning it all up, and which I did, took some time, and then I found a lid for that little metal container, and I put the lid on there, and I just like crammed it shut, and maybe I bent the thing a little bit when it hit the floor, but that thing was on there. I didn't want to bump it again or whatever. So later on, when he went to come and do his meditation, that aspect of his meditation, there were four of us there. So he went to open his little cylinder jar, and he couldn't get it open. And he was trying to open it, and I had bent the thing or something, and that lid was like jammed on there like anything. So he's like, "What is this?" And he went and he handed it to a few other people in the room to try to get it off, and no one could get it off. And then he took it in his hand again, and he was trying to get it. And he just said, kind of like in a soft way, like, "Who is the fool?" Right? And then in that moment, like everyone just kind of stopped, and everyone's eyes just kind of went over to me. And I was like, "Well," and he kind of understood, and everyone understood in that moment it was me, and he said, "Oh, there's no worries like that." So uh, it was an endearing moment because, like the guru, what the guru does is the guru will test us, like knowingly or unknowingly. But the tests don't come in the form of like, here's a multiple choice test, here's the, do you know all the answers to these things? But the test will be that we're put into situations, and then the qualities that manifest in those situations can be seen. So when someone calls you a fool, what do you do? What do you do? How do you respond internally, right? Especially if it's your guru, someone who cares for you very much. The idea is that there should be an opening of the heart. There should be kind of like, okay, here's a moment where I'm meant to be attentive and learn, right? So it's like that in the Bhagavatam. As we get into the Bhagavatam, we're going to hear this kind of thing from the gurus that teach in this book.
Mm.
There'll be times when words like fool are used, and we're not meant to use that to criticize people or look at people as if they're fools. They're directed at our heart, not at other people's hearts. So that's going to be something we have to be mindful of as we go through it, not to think that this book is the teachings here are directed towards others. That everything about yoga is meant to be directed towards the heart, our own heart. So every time these things come up, it's like a little checkpoint, like, okay, how am I doing on this point? And here, the point about the fool is that we make a mistake of thinking we're going to understand spiritual Ras very clearly at the very beginning, and therefore we're going to jump ahead and skip ahead so many books in the Bhagavatam and read about all of the intimate things about Krishna and the gopis, like the rasa dance and all this stuff, right? Which is what the academic people tend to do, and other groups as well. Not caring so much for all of the different levels of realization that are needed, will immediately go to the 10th canto. So the commentary is cautioning us to go forward slowly and patiently and allow the things to, and eventually we'll understand everything. So yeah, looks like our time is really much near the end. I think, do you want to read can you read the last paragraph?
Yeah, sure. One should conclude, therefore, that the serious student of the Ras should
I love that.
receive the
I love that. Student of the Ras. That's
uh,
like, that's what we are as Bhakti Yogis. We're students of the Ras. Yeah.
should receive the message of Bhagavatam in the chain of disciplic succession from Srila Shukadev Goswami, who describes the Bhagavatam from its very beginning, and not whimsically to satisfy the mundaner, who has very little knowledge in transcendental science. Srimad Bhagavatam is also carefully presented that is so carefully presented that a sincere and serious person can at once enjoy the ripened fruit of Vedic knowledge simply by drinking the nectarian juice through the mouth of Shukadev Goswami or his bona fide representative.
It's actually really beautifully poetic.
Yeah, there's a major context here that we can bring up in the future of in today's age, also cultural appropriation and spiritual bypassing in this context of
Yeah,
who's presenting these teachings, why are they presenting them, what is their
yeah.
motivation, and what is the qualification of such a person who's sharing such knowledge. Um, that can be like several podcast episodes on its own, but I just wanted to drop that in there. That's something we can pick up on in the future.
Absolutely. In fact, we probably will pick up on that next week because next week we're going to get into the actual sages in the forest of Naimisharanya and how they
Mm,
choose a speaker. We're going to hear about these great sages, what they were doing in this forest, why they were there, and why they chose all of a sudden to hear from this great sage. And it lists the qualifications,
nice.
yeah, of someone who's going to do that.
Till next week of binging 6 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam altogether. Well, thank you all for attending. And as we said last week, please send us some feedback if you'd like. These are the pilot episodes, so this is the perfect time. And if you'd like to, if you have a friend or someone who you feel that can benefit from uh, tuning into the VIP section of the pilot episodes of the podcast, please let us know and we'll somehow either share a link or add them to the audience on Facebook.
We also do have we have an email now.
Nice.
So if
What is it?
anybody wants us to talk about something in particular next week, or you have some kind of question about what we talked about this week, the email address is streamofbhakti@kirtanvancouver.com.
Let me type it into the chat board here.
Stream of Bhakti.
Stream of Bhakti at kirtanvancouver.com.
And that will help us, you know, hear from you in this as well, and like what kind of things that you'd like to hear brought out from the Bhagavatam as we go through it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, have a great week, everyone. See you next Saturday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, same spot.
Yeah.